So that being said, Stacey Piercey is our keynote speaker today for Unschooling. And I can't wait to hear this conversation called Defining Success. So Stacey, it's all yours.
Cheers. Thanks, Karima. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see all of you. Some of you, I know some of you have your cameras off. I can't see all of the panes anyway, but I'm really excited to be here. When I first heard and met Karima in a clubhouse meeting, she just blew me away. It was something about cooking grits in the kitchen, and then we went off on talking about how kids need to fail. And it was a brilliant conversation. And I'm chatting with Robin in the background going, who is this woman? She's amazing. I just want to be part of her personal space all the time. So much great energy. And yeah, you just want to bring her in. Just bring her in more of Karima is what I say. So we need more of that. So I'm really honored that she invited me to be here. This is a lecture that I did for the Canadian Online Homeschool Conference a couple of years ago. And I've expanded it and contracted it a bit to be sort of applicable, especially to the context of what we're talking about here, because that audience was all kinds of homeschoolers. Christian homeschoolers and eclectic homeschoolers and classical homeschoolers. It was a full range of people that came, and it was a very popular lecture. And it's not about what I have to say here. It's about this resonating with every single homeschool parent, because we get to that point in April, all of you know, where we panic and freak out and we don't know whether or not we've done anything, and we think we're like wrecking our kids, and we don't know how to report to our homeschool authority, and we don't know who we should be accountable to, and there's like this meltdown that happens every spring. So it's quite appropriate that this should happen right now, yeah, at the end of April, because we all seem to go through it. So I'll introduce myself a little bit so you understand the context. I am an entrepreneur. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been starting businesses for a very long time, and that started back in the Y2K era. I was part of a lot of .com startups before they failed and bombed, and been part of lots of venture capital meetings. And I'm originally a computer programmer. That's how I got into the industry. But before that, I went to university and did history and English and thought about becoming a teacher. I went away and taught in China in a university for a year, and that was a hot mess, and I hated that. So I knew I didn't want to be a teacher at all. Like that was like I was registered to go into education, ironically, and I didn't even want kids. How's that? I didn't want kids, and I didn't want to be a teacher, and I left China and said, that's it. I'll be an IT consultant, and that's where I'll go. And I started working with teams off of that experience and how to be more successful and cohesive as a team. At the same time, I started doing some master's work in human computer interaction. It's like how we interact as human beings with computers and how do we make it more ergonomic and comfortable. And then I magically got married over a weekend in Vegas and was pregnant 30 days later. So, and they just kept coming. So I have 3 teen boys that are 19, 17, and soon to be 15. And I homeschooled them, unschooled them essentially right from the beginning. And it started with sort of almost the end of kindergarten, and my oldest melting down in the parking lot going, I can't come all day. That sucks. That's too much. I can't do that for grade 1. That's too much for me. And so that kind of started us down the path. But the introduction to unschooling came from my time actually in China. And I met an unschooling family there who was everything that you know to be unschoolers. You know, he's 10 or 11 and can't read and can't do math, and you know, he can't tell time in a face watch, but he could build the most amazing structures, and could pick up Chinese dialects like popcorn. Like he was just such a bright kid. And so that stuck in the back of my head, and we started exploring that idea. And it was just, we went off right out the gate. Right from grade 1, we decided that's what we were going to do. We were going to be unschoolers. And it's been 13 years, and my kids have meandered in and out of different school experiences and always been unschooled. And so that's where I am. The latest venture was I started a kids entrepreneurship program that was bought up by an online school called Galileo. And I continue to do that. And then my last entrepreneurial venture is a a newsletter that I'll put in the resources at the end, where I'm taking all of my homeschool resources and putting in a weekly newsletter for people to access if you're interested. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. So I want to talk now about defining success. So let's see if I can get my slides to go down the way I want to. Haha. So the breakout of this lecture is broken down into three. We talk about success in cycles, and success can be in a personal level. What about success for your children? And then how do we define success within our own homeschooling? And the homeschooling part's probably not, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, because we're more unschoolers than anything, but there is if you want to apply a structure to your homeschooling that helps you define success within that, I'll offer some resources at the end. But the bulk of this talk is personally and within our own kids. So how do you define success? This is a really, really tricky thing. If you think about it from any means, we think about successful people, and what does that mean to you? Does it mean that there's lots of money, that you ran that marathon, that you achieved that degree, that you started that business? Is success extended out beyond us into our interpersonal interactions? Is it about the things that we've acquired over time? I was able to save money and buy a house. And understanding what success is as a definition, I think, is really important, because I don't adhere to this definition of success. I don't like it, and I don't pull it. I don't like the notion of how this is defined from a language standpoint about attainment, especially popularity and profit. I kind of balk at the notion of that. So personal success is something really important to talk about inwardly with yourself, and to come up with a definition of success for yourself. Is it money? Is it power? Is it getting that degree? And if you don't have a solid foundation in your understanding of who you are and how you feel about yourself, and if you are successful, this will be very difficult to do with your children. We start to project. If we haven't clearly defined success for ourselves, when we start having kids, we start putting our own definitions of success onto them. And I think it's a cautionary tale, especially those that often talk about being proud of their children. And I don't strive to be proud of my kids. It is not something that I ever aspire to be. I hope to empower them to be proud of themselves, and whatever that means for them. But I don't use my children as an opportunity to display my success. My children's successes are not necessarily my own, and I try to keep a division there. So that's just me personally. So there's other people on here who've defined success. Richard Branson, we'd all say he's reasonably successful. Arianna Huffington, but it's actually Maya Angelou that I think has defined perfectly. Even though Richard Branson talks about being happy, like it doesn't really measured by how much money you have, but Maya, I think, really did a great job, where she says you're liking yourself, you like what you do, and you like how you do it, because success comes in the moment as well. And it's really important to be constantly introspective about how we feel about success, especially when we're homeschooling, and especially when we're unschooling, because it's nebulous. It just sits out there in the constant ether. So to start in talking about how we are successful in our unschooling, we do have to do the inner work first. We have to think about how we would define success for ourselves. And so it starts with you, it starts with me, right? So when we talk about defining success from where you are right now and then where you want to be, because if you think I'm not successful right now, that's a fallacy. And that's something that the inner work that you have to do, and it has to be positive and forward thinking. If we go retrospectively in regrets, then success will always be something that's out of your reach. And it's important to do that. It starts with me, and you can ground yourself by creating goals and then making them real. So this was the work that I did in a lot of corporate teams, is that they're focusing on their failures within that and not focusing on the successes that they had. And sometimes that disconnect would cause a lot of strife within the team. And you and your kids are a team. You're a team together. And if you're constantly in this state of regret and looking back and we should have, and I wish we would have, then you're not looking forward and not thinking positively about what you want to do. So I think it's really important that we spend the time doing the work for ourselves first. I love Brené Brown, and her quote in here is that we have to be really careful about that not enough problem. I'm not a good enough homeschooler. I'm not thin enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not a good enough mom. We start comparing ourselves to other homeschool and unschooling families. That's going to unravel very, very fast. So we have to understand that we are enough right now. Where you start right now, you are already successful. And if you start from that place and move forward, then everything will be positive, right? So if you understand that you are capable of moving forward, then you can imagine the possibilities going forward in your unschooling journey with your kids. So it's a nice transition at that point. And I do encourage you to do the personal work first and make sure that you have a definition of foundation of personal success, and that separation occurs, because how do you then determine what a successful child is? So there's a bridge that needs to occur. I think my window is kind of covering some of that up. There's a bridge in going from am I successful to what is a successful child, right? There's steps to developing a successful child, but one, and this is an unschooling thing, hands down, is one thing actually must happen first in an unschooling environment, and it has to be choice. A child has to be given choice and freedom and autonomy for even the remote possibility of success to occur, because it encourages them to understand that they have value and a voice within the conversation about how you choose to spend your time. It builds flexible thinking in children when they have choice. It also creates ownership. And you'll see as I go through how we're defining goals, how owning a goal is really important. And when they have choice, they tend to own that option much greater. And now it changes from this teacher-student environment in unschooling to a partnership. I've learned a long time ago to lead from behind with my kids. I wait for them to come to me, but it doesn't mean I don't throw things in front of them and see where they go. But they'll come to me and look for support. And then I'll say, how can I make that happen? How can I remove obstacles for you? Which is also the sign of a good leader in any organization, those ones that are helping remove obstacles so you can be your best self. All I would hope for is that my children surpass me, right? I want them to be better than anything that I could have possibly imagined as they have defined it. So choice, I think, is the bridge between defining success for kids. So if you were to project, and this is some little bit of work you can do right now, if you project into their future, what would your child look like for you to say that they were successful? If you were to think about the future of your children, what would you say? And you can write it down and work it out and put it into a journal. Is it the definition of success where it's power, popularity, money, education, awards? Is it happy? And if that's like, how do you put a definition to that? I mean, even unschooling, how do you really define that? How do you define self-directed education? Is it capital letters self-directed education, or is it small letters? And it's like, Peter Gray says, I challenge you to define that. What is healthy? Is it mental health? Is it physical health? Do they have to be like a bodybuilder or a triathlete? Or healthy just means that they've got good body care and they're self-aware? What is that? And if you were to say what it was that they were to be successful, what would it be? And if you hold that thought in your head, can you say that they would say the same thing for themselves? Right? So does the definition now change when you include your children in the conversation? When I sit down and I could have this conversation with my kids as young as probably 4 or 5. And I'll show you how I did it in my homeschooling, but in the last slides, but we call it the happy test. So we would start the day with what our objectives were for the day. And if it was to sit in pajamas and eat popcorn and watch Harry Potter, then that was fine. And then we do the happy test at the end of today. How was today? And if they would say this today was the best day ever, I'm like, why? Why was it the best day ever? And how do we repeat that in the future so that emotion and that feeling still happens? And if it was there was meh, or I was bored, or something didn't work out for me, or I felt uncomfortable, then we work ways not necessarily to avoid discomfort, but to understand why we were feeling uncomfortable to begin with. And we've always called it the happy test. How was your day today? Was it a good day? Was this a happy test today? And so if you were to ask them, you say, this is how I would define success for you. This is how I know you would be successful. And sometimes it's the reverse. I just want you to find your own passion and move forward and be feeling successful in yourself. And a teen will blurt out to say, but if I don't have a PhD by the time I'm 25, I will feel a failure. And that opens a conversation with them about how they're defining success for themselves. And I think that's really important that you understand, because if it is a goal and it is important to them, then we need to support them as unschooling parents in trying to achieve that goal and helping them define their why. Why are they setting that goal? And that is it to be popular, or is it genuinely because they want to be a rocket scientist? It could actually be that, right? So fair enough. So for me and the teams that I've worked with, and for my definition of success in my own kids, it has a lot more to do with that invisible skill set. And so I've expanded on this one a little bit. How do we ensure that we're supporting their goals in order to be successful? It's bolstering up that invisible skill set, I think, is key. And so that's what I'm going to walk through for the next 10 or 15 minutes, are these 7 things. We know what the first 6 are. Everybody's seen it, but I add cooperative play. And the reason why I add cooperative play is because I think success is very dependent on that thing that we're missing. When someone asks us the question, are your kids socialized? And we all cringe and melt down at the ridiculous notion of that question. Of course, they're well socialized, but do they belong? And I think that's really important, a sense of belonging, which is very different from being socialized. And can they belong in a group? Do they got some peeps? Do they got, places where they feel they have a tribe? And I think that's really, really important. And I didn't realize it was across the board and across genders, because I have 3 boys. And I always knew that men need, this is why they like team sports. This is why they tend to play group video games. They got to have a tribe, man. They've got to have a guild. There has to be some sort of group that they get with. And I've got a very tribal husband who he won't run with me because I'm a runner, but he will play soccer with me because it's a game. That's important. It's not fun unless a group of people gets, kind of like Kareem, I was telling you about that party last night. We have to get on a bus and drink together as we pedal around. Yeah, right. That was definitely not a girl's decision to be able to do that. So I think that cooperative play brings a sense of belonging. So I think that's where we'll go in. So I'm gonna start breaking these down based on some of, I'll try to add in some research that I've done about each one of these independent things. And as an entrepreneur, these are key. These critical, invisible skill sets is exactly what entrepreneurs need, but also becoming an entrepreneur builds it for sure, because you just can't unless you have it. So perseverance, of course, is that keep going. When it gets really, really hard, you sort of push through. It's the grit. There's a really great book that I think it's Angela Duckworth that I got this from, where she talks about grit and the power of positive thinking, and that when you're going to work with your kids doing anything, you have to be careful to work with interests first, and don't worry about strengths and weaknesses. Interests must drive the work that they're doing. If they're not interested, then it has no meaning. I think S.E. Neal, is it, who did the Summerhill? He has the Summerhill project that's in the UK. He talks about, play when you put work to it, is just you're goofing around now. You're actually not allowing them to play freely if all of a sudden you put purpose and learning to it. So I think interest has to be there. I always think about piano players. right? And then we have practice. For them to actually persevere, they've got to practice through it. If the interest is not there, the practice is going to suck and they won't like it and won't want to do it. They have to have a why. And that's what the purpose is. Why are you bothering to do this? Why are you learning to play piano? And then hope. Hope is key. I think that I will get better. I'm hoping that there will be progression. I think there will be an outcome here, and I believe that in and of myself. And I think that it's like when a child starts to play piano and you can feel them lean in when they're doing anything and they lean into something, you can see the practice, purpose, and hope starting to evolve. And we don't want to focus on strengths or weaknesses at the stage. Perseverance doesn't come from pointing out that they're not progressing. That's not helpful at all. So it fits really well. Perseverance fits really well in unschooling because we can foster that. We can say, what are your interests? And let's get it into practice and let's find a purpose to why we're doing it, as opposed to you should just learn math, because it's not super helpful. If it doesn't work. But if they're kinking out on Euclidean geometry, man, then let's put it in front of them and work through it, right? The next one is, of course, resilience. And this is a very big problem in the school system right now. I talk to tons of mental health professionals. I know many teachers who are ed psych, and they are dealing with so much mental health issues in the school system because they don't have any resilience. They don't have the ability to fail. And this is a really important part of failure. It's the difference between I have failed and I'm a failure. And resilience comes from that: get up off your backside and do it again. The Japanese proverb is like perfect for this. It is directly related to hope, which was the perseverance before. If we don't believe we can get better, we don't continue to try. And that's a really important part about building success as a foundation, is celebrating failure. And this is how Kareem and I got into a conversation. And a lot of what I do in children's entrepreneurship is we high five failure. If you're not failing, it means you're not trying. And of course, that adage of the road to success is paved in failure. And that, I think, is really important. Maureen Healy has in her book, Growing Happy Kids, says that this is, I just love this list. So the positivity is very important. That's the mindset. Resilience comes from connection. When we have resilience, it doesn't necessarily mean alone, that they've failed in isolation, and there must be a connection. So we're going back to that tribe or that idea of belonging and a connection to somebody else in their failure. I always say that I allow my kids to fall, but I'm right behind them so I can push them back up and say that's fine. But you do actually have to let them fall on their backside for that to work. And spirituality. So I am not a religious person at all, but spirituality is something entirely different. And this could even be in a yoga practice. It could be time in nature. There is a place of spiritual connection we need to embrace and bring our children into that for whatever it means for them. Sometimes it's meditation. It definitely can be prayer. It definitely can be community groups. My kids also are not involved in religion in any way, but we have a local United Church that has a youth group, and they spend every Friday with these kids, because whatever it is about that spiritual connection that they have with these children seems to feed their inner self a little bit. So I think resilience, it's very important to find connection with other human beings and to build some kind of spiritual practice into their day, and whatever that means. For us, it was actually time in nature. That was what it was for us. We would get outside and we would quietly go walk through the forest. And I think that's a really big deal. Confidence. So this is a big thing. And I find that in a lot of kids that I work with, even in entrepreneurship, they have this I can't perspective in what they're doing. And it's very hard to work past that. If they don't have that sort of can do attitude, it becomes almost a stalemate for them. And confidence comes from trying things and then actually succeeding at it, because now you see that you can be successful. So I saw this in developing kids develop their own businesses, it's just, even if it's like a gazingas pin, whatever it is that they've got going on, they got a lemonade stand and somebody exchanges money for that lemonade. They look back on the experience and say, I can do that. I know now that I can build a business. I can feel that sort of going forward. It is always your ability to perform a task. So you want to make sure that if they're setting these grandiose goals because they want to be able to play piano, but if they could sit down at the piano and play a small song, and why do they have to start from the beginning? Why do they have to start with practice and make sure their fingers are in the right position? Why don't they just learn that song? Why can't it just be that? And that has always been a mantra in our homeschooling and our unschooling, is to say, I don't think you have to start with the novice crappy stuff. If you want to paint a huge painting, I'll buy you a huge canvas and you can just go crazy, and then I'll find somebody to buy it, and that's fantastic. So it's like, you can do it, that role or that task, you can actually get through the other side, and it's absolutely rooted in humility and not in pride. We can't come in there and be boastful or have an ego. Is to say, I am willing to try and fail because I believe that I will be successful. And that's where that self-confidence begins to build, right? And it starts to come in goal setting and planning for themselves, which I'll talk about a little bit later. If they set a goal for themselves and they accomplish that goal in micro increments, it starts to build self-confidence. And I think that that's really important. And then of course I'm biased and I think every kid should start a business. So I just kind of threw that in there. Creativity. Creativity can be anything. I have only one artist in the house, and then I have one who would like to be an author, but I have another one who doesn't think that he's creative at all. And yet I see that creativity flourish in tech ideas, in just building a Discord server. And when you point out that the idea of creativity comes from thinking differently than other people or coming up with new solutions to a problem, that is a form of creativity. And you should encourage them to take it to the edge, take it to messy, take it to big. We always did everything. I never showed them. They said they want to do, something that looked like cubism to me. I don't show them Pablo Picasso first. I allow them to develop it, and then I bring in experts later when it tends to go, because when we put the greatness in front of them all the time, then they become self-deprecating that they could never accomplish what somebody else does. So I try really hard to insulate them a little bit when they're going through a creative goal. And then Christine Barnett has a highly autistic son who's actually at the Perimeter Institute in Canada now, and he's a theoretical physicist, but he wasn't even verbal at 18 months. And she believed in creating muchness. So if he wants to create, this big mess of string in the kitchen, which he did, she bought him 400 balls of yarn so that he could do that for him. If he got interested he was really interested in maps, and he memorized all the road maps in the entire US. He's a genius. So, I mean, he's autistic. He's an amazing kid. It's a great book to read. And she turned him into her own little GPS system. So she'd plunk him in the back. He was 3, by the way. And he could tell her where to go at any city all over the US. But she would play that. She would put every single map in front of him and buy him all these atlases. She discovered later that the string actually was him working out string theory at 18 months old. So I'm not kidding. It's a great book. It's definitely something to read, but I love the term muchness that she uses. Surround them in muchness. And even if it just is something they quit later, it's the muchness, the bigness, the messy that allows their own creativity to flourish. And I think that really builds success in a child's mind. This is like my favorite skill, but maybe it's because I'm a computer programmer that I kink out on this all the time. The problem, think, solution. I talk my kids through this all the time. Work the problem. You can work the problem, just figure it out. And if we can figure out the problem, and it builds so many secondary skills. So any opportunity to build critical thinking, we play this game in our house called Sevens. So name 7 planets, name 7 Greek gods, name 7 deciduous trees, name 7s. We just are constantly, we do it when we're bored standing in line of this. I want you to think through something and try to use your memory and try to go. It's just something that we do constantly. We're in a constant state of political debate in my house. That's always right. Oh my gosh. And yeah, that's what's going on in the world is a topic of conversation for us for sure. So critical thinking, I think, is a missing skill in a lot of school graduates right now, because they're not giving them the opportunity to think through a problem. They give them the answer. Essentially, there's one right answer for everything. So actually, the critical thinking skill, Seth Godin has a really great story about that, because he works with university students, first-year university students in business and especially marketing. And he puts a pile of children's blocks in front of them and says, build me something. And they're in teams and they freak out because there's no right answer. There isn't something specific they need to come. They actually, if they're going to be marked on it, they have a really difficult time when given a pile of children's blocks and said, build me something interesting, especially when he puts the word interesting on the end. And then it seems that they melt down. They can't really function in it. So giving them opportunities to just build something from nothing builds a lot of critical thinking. Lego is brilliant for this, of course. Pile of dirt that's in with water and some sticks. That's it. That's right. Yeah, I have pictures of my kids building this massive teepee fort thing for 12 hours out in some forest outside of our city. And we revisited that place and other people added to it. So all of a sudden it became this community project and we didn't know who was involved in it. And that consumed our attention for the better part of 6 weeks, was this teepee structure that it had like vestibules and like breakout rooms on the side. And it had like a dog park and they had an obstacle course. And it's like, I don't know who were building these things, but nobody wrecked it, which was brilliant. Like nobody tore it down. Everybody just kept adding on to it. I'm sure it was a fire hazard at some point, but at the point we abandoned it, it's like there's a forest fire in southern Alberta and you're wondering if whether or not it was your kid's teepee that did it. Yeah, there you go. So independent. This is when I define success for my kids, just so you're wondering what my definition would be, is that they're independent and self-sufficient. That's what it is, especially financially independent and self-sufficient. And that's what I would hope for my kids. And that's like, beat them over the head with this. If you are independent and self-sufficient, my friend, you have conquered the world. That's it. And please don't leave the world in a shittier way than before you were here. That's the other thing. You don't have to change the world, but please it shouldn't be worse off because you exist in it. That would be my only other piece of advice for my kids. So self-sufficient is, can they do it on their own? So I get into this conversation with people about free range learning, and you have to be careful because I would say Lenora wouldn't agree with the idea that they're just left alone. And we will create an environment where they are constantly frightened if we're dumping them off the end of the pier and say swim in any situation. We don't want to build low resilience. We want to build their self-confidence through small changes in what they do. So for me, I'll give the example of buying their own chocolate bar. So they can pick their own chocolate bar, there's the choice. And then they get to carry it up to the till. And then they can hand over the money. And I literally had kids that were like, nope, I'm not talking to that human being. There's no way I'm doing that. So we build up to it. You can go pay for it yourself. You have to work out the change. And first I'm behind them. And then I'm on the other side of the store. And then I'm just outside the door. And then I'm in my vehicle. And then I'm sending them down on their own. And if you can map that to anything else that you're doing in small changes and wait for them to show you that they can do it themselves, and do not interfere with a child who says, I can do it. I have a middle one like that right from birth, who was like, I can do it. And just back off and just let them do it. Just let them figure it out, even if they do it poorly. My kids wore shoes on the wrong feet forever, and wore their shirts backwards or inside out forever. Cuts and bruises because they decided that they could manage the screen door in their own, pinched fingers in like really heavy doors. I can do it. And you just have to stand back and let them go there. Right. So it just doesn't mean alone. And I think that that's really, really important. And I build it into absolutely everything we can do. I actually had buckets when they were kids of things that they could do on their own. The strewing buckets, I had strewing buckets. I really literally did that. And I always thought the strewing bucket for one would be it always ended up being the other one that was interested in somebody else's bucket. So then I stopped putting names on the bucket. And then I started like hiding the strewing. So it became a treasure hunt every day. I was bored. I was like, it's got to be entertaining for me. That's the way it goes. But I also worked in SMART goals very early on into their life, which I'm going to explain a little bit. Is that idea that it's specific and measurable, attainable, reasonable, and certainly time bound. It's like, this is what you want to do. When are you going to have it done? And how can I help you accomplish that by that point? And is that too big? You know, it's not specific enough, or it's not reasonable. Let's break it down into tiny goals and make it something over a different span of time. And then if they don't accomplish that goal, we do the happy test and say the trying was worth it. So we kind of go back. And definitely embracing those tools of independence. I built my house in a way that my kids could do things for themselves as much as possible. I haven't cooked a breakfast or a lunch for my kids in probably 10 years, man. I just don't. And the only reason why I force dinner on them is because I'm obsessed with them eating more vegetables. And the plate comes back with all the vegetables on it still, but there I try. I strive for more vegetables in 3 teen boys' bodies. You know, if I could just get them to shower more, that would be great. Yeah. So the last one is cooperative play. It's not really an invisible skill, but I really think it should be, right? Is volunteerism. I think we should give back to our community. I'm a big philanthropic entrepreneur, and I believe in giving back wholeheartedly, and we build in a sense of wherever that needs to be. It's not, well, we'll go work at the soup kitchen, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but sometimes it's just helping a neighbor, and sometimes it's involving ourselves in a youth group, and sometimes it's just stuffing envelopes, but it's offering ourselves up with unconditional love to other individuals so that they know that there's no reciprocity expected, especially when they don't know it's you. And we look for projects, for random acts of kindness, without looking for the pat on the back or the gold star or whatever it is that you think that you will get for doing it. Because I find that social media tends to breed that. I'm going to do something nice so that I can show it off over here and get the accolades for it. And we're not a family that does that. So we give freely and often give quietly. And we've built that into our unschooling experience for sure. We're gamers for sure, video gamers, board gamers, and this is cooperative play. I've put a resource in the last slide about my favorite cooperative play game called Wildcraft, and they learn all about medicinal herbs, and they have to go get blueberries together, and they can't come back to grandma's house until all the blueberries are gathered. So they have to help each other out. So someone gets a cut or someone gets a bee sting, then you can give your herbs to the other players so that they can be more successful in the game. It's cute. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful cooperative game. Not that I have any issue with competition, as I think competition is healthy and important, but I think we're learning to work together, which is different from a group project. Which my oldest actually went to school for 3 years, and he said that was the bane of his existence. He hated group projects. Either there's one person doing all the work, you know, or someone sabotaging the effort constantly. So it's different. It's different than working cooperatively or doing cooperative play. So here's the quote from A.S. Neal from Summerhill, is that learning should not be deliberately seasoned with play to make it palatable. I was like, I have a game, a card game that's it's a math game that actually encourages mental math, and it's like addition and subtraction. And my kids called me out so fast. Actually, one said to me, sat down, he looked at it and he went, "Are you kidding me?" I think he was only 7. That smells like school, Mom. I was like, okay, not a fun game, evidently. So I tried. I kept trying to buy these things that maybe would encourage these kind of harder skills as opposed to soft skills, and they would call me out. John Holt talks about that all the time, where he went and threw a friend's daughter wanted him to throw a baseball for her in the alley. So he was going to throw the ball and she was going to hit it, and she stood there with a stick perfectly straight, holding the stick on her shoulder, and his immediate inclination was to go, okay, so spread your feet apart and turn sideways towards me and bend your knees and then hold the bat, you know, above your shoulder. And she said, "I didn't ask you to teach me. I just asked you to throw the ball. That's it." So I think that we have to be careful about that, and to make sure that that cooperative play is actually play, and it's fine, and it's fine. So what does this look like at school level? I know I'm kind of running out of time, Karima, so I'll yeah, so I don't want to go over time. So how do we do this? That's what I'm going to show you. It isn't, I'm not keen to tell other people how to homeschool, because it's different for every person that homeschools. You're going to have your own methodology, especially unschooling. But if you can sit back and measure success, you'll see it's working. If you know what success looks like for your kids and yourself, you will see it evolve over time. But because I am a project manager and a freak of nature, I have to put everything in organization. My kids never see this, though. They would laugh at me. So I break it down. I know. And I'm a software engineer. So of course I've got to have agile scrums in there. So come on. It's like my kids don't need me ever. So that's a problem for an unschooled parent, is what am I supposed to do with my day? What do I do all day if my kids actually spend all their time learning on their own? It's and you leave the corporate world where all your friends were, or fake friends, or whatever they are, as your peers. And it's yeah, you have this emotional meltdown that all of a sudden you're wandering around the house like the cat meowing, hello, hello. I've spent so much time doing that as an unschooler. So I break it down into what they have shown as their interest and their goals, because they set it up for me of what they want to do, even if it's watching Harry Potter all day in pajamas. And I start, let's say you want to learn the French Revolution. Okay, that's a really, really big goal. And then I break it out into quarters. Then I break it down into a month. Then I break it down into a week. And then I talk about it today. And we have 5-minute scrum at the beginning of every day. And I still do that. What are you working on today? What do you want to accomplish today? What are your goals for today? And then I do a 5-minute happiness check-in at the end of the day. Did you accomplish that? Why not? What did you do differently? Did you do something more interesting? And was there something that prevented you from achieving that goal today that I can help you with? And so when they were younger, they were better at this, believe it or not. The older kids are actually a lot worse at doing this, because they just happily meander through their day until somebody lights a fire under their backside and they decide they want to do that. So and the accountability to other people other than me. So there was a transition point in unschooling where my teens required accountability, and it wasn't coming from me anymore. So I put them in place with mentors, or they're in classes, or like they're in online courses. And I am not opposed to bribing at all. I think bribery is a brilliant tool. And it's, you want those robot bucks, and like, what can I do to incentivize you so that it becomes more measurable for you? And we have this like negotiation point of what that could look like. And then there's always the what's in it for me, and I never get anything out of it. But the bribery comes and it works. Believe it or not, sometimes it's just, can you make some chocolate chip cookies by the end of the day? I can do that. I can accomplish that for you today so that you can be more successful. Can you bring me a burrito? Like, I'm in the middle of working on this course and I could really use it if you just brought me food to my computer. I could do that. I can help you out with that. So that's how we break it down. And then it's only one method that you can use. But that's the SMART goal method. You'd find a system that works for you, because there's lots of different goal setting systems that are out there. This is just specific and measurable. I want to lose 10 pounds. That's specific. Measurable. Yep, I could stand on the scale and see that I'm not accomplishing that today. It's attainable. I totally can lose 5 pounds. It's relevant. Yes, because it improves my health. That's my why. That's why I'm doing it. That's your relevancy. And I have a deadline for it. It has to be relevant or reasonable is another use of the R. Is it reasonable to lose 10 pounds in a week? No. So I circle back to that and change the deadline, because nothing moves the needle like a deadline. So deadlines are very important, I think, when you're setting goals. If you don't have goals, their goals are like the signposts on a path, right? It's a plan. And without it, it's like being dropped in the forest and you're going at high speed and trying desperately to dodge the trees and the rocks and the ravines. And it doesn't mean you have to stay on the path. You can't create a new path, but a plan are the signposts to see that you're accomplishing that goal along the way. So it's always been part of my life. It's important for that to happen. I'm a checklist person that never goes back and looks at the checklist, believe it or not. I will make the checklist and then I flesh out the plan on my own in a different way. Kids. So you can use SMART goals, but there's lots. You have lots of options. There's WHOOP, which is wish, outcome, obstacle, and plan. There's grow. And this one, a lot of homeschoolers like, is the goal, the current reality, the obstacles, and the way forward, or what's your will to get it done. And then hard is heartfelt. Animated means that you actually put action to it. It's required and it should be difficult. Hard's different. It's that's a little bit more of a corporate one, but it's also for self-development, and it's an interesting model. You can look to the experts like Dave Allen's Get Things Done. GTD is a big option out there. I like James Clear's Atomic Habits because he built upon the power of habit, and he actually has actionable methodologies in his book to achieve goals, because it is actually habit forming when we work with that. You can use Evernote, you can use Notion, you can use Kanban, which I'll show you in a second, a vision board, a smash journal, a bullet journal, a to-do list, and not big life journal. And the reason why I don't suggest that is because it's too canned. It actually is trying to build that invisible skill set. There's nothing wrong with big life journal, but when it comes to encouraging kids to think for themselves about what their goals are, it's just a little bit too guided, I think. I mean, I don't mind it, but it doesn't. Smash journal and bullet journal, it's empty. A vision board is empty. Evernote is empty. Notion is empty. So you start from a clean slate, and then you can see over time what you've accomplished. I used to use Evernote, and now I use Notion to keep accountability in there. And Notion's great because it's like a database. So it is free for one person to use, which is great. You don't have to make it big. So a Kanban board, again, I'm a software engineer. It's to do, doing, and done. And I literally put it on the wall in stickies. And my kids could do it themselves. They would write pictures instead of words before they could read about what they wanted to accomplish. And they liked moving it across the board. What are you focusing on right now? And so we put ideas and notions on there, and there was temper tantrums sometimes because they were making their goals too big, and they literally would wreck the Kanban board. It would be ripped down, all sticky notes would be torn. And that's like, well, let's do that happy test. Let's see how that was going for you today. Obviously, we were either not setting goals right, or this isn't the best method, but they always came back to Kanban. They actually liked it because Kanban can get very big. And it's a lot of fun. So my kids are using Kanban right now to design their own video game. So I've put this up on my living room wall, and I made tape sections, and they've got sticky notes and print offs, and they're planning out a 2D game and doing level design with it. So it's translated into a software project for them, learning project for them. So it's kind of a fun skill if you come up with a methodology. So it can get big, but start simple. Start simple in your planning. But without the plan, without the signposts, then you're dropped in a forest, headed straight for a tree. So do be careful, just meandering. Or you get to April and you go, I swear all we've done is stared at the wall and watched paint dry, because you can't remember your year at all. So sometimes it's just about accountability. Thanks very much, everyone. If you have any questions, you can ask me. The things that I've referenced, I put on this list, as well as my newsletter is on there. That newsletter is just fun, by the way. It's just, I reached into the bag of my goodies from over the last 13 years, and I throw it in a newsletter and send it to you. I don't write anything. I just send you links to things I've found interesting under a theme. Like, I don't know, spring was one, and Rube Goldberg was another. And that's so 70s. I obsessed over the 70s because I grew up in the 70s, and I miss dial phones and things like that. You're right. Yeah. And having to walk over to the TV to turn the channel. Yeah. So it's just a grab bag of stuff if anybody's interested in it. But the Seth Godin Stop Stealing Dreams is a really good YouTube video to watch. He has a manifesto out there about how the education system is literally ruining society because they're just wrecking kids. So yeah, and he's kind of a power brain thought guy. Anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed that or got something out of it that will help you.
Oh my goodness. Can I just say, oh my goodness?
I'm glad. I was probably talking really fast because I was like looking at my timeline going, oh my gosh, I could talk for hours about this stuff.
I mean, like, oh my goodness. So first of all, let me get my notes. So going back to when you said, I mean, there was so much. What you need to know, first of all, Stacey, first of all, thank you. Thank you for sharing of your life, of your time. Thank you for really tying in how we ended yesterday. So yesterday, Iris Chen was our last breakout room speaker, one of the last two. And her topic was, how do you define success, right? And I said, you know, you and I spoke first, and then you had this title, right? And then
Yeah.
when Iris said that that's what she wanted to talk about, I said, I said, all right, there must be a reason why there needs to be a repeat of this conversation. And what I love that happened so beautifully, Iris laid the foundation, and then you came and just like, psh,
Oh, good. Oh, I'm glad it meshed well. Yeah.
Um, I just have a couple of things that I got from what you shared, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So if people want to, you can, after I finish, folks can raise your hand, and then Stacey can call on you, and you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. So this is a couple of things that I got. Maya Angelou's quote, that's also where Iris landed. That's where she ended with that, and you began with that. So liking yourself, liking what you do, liking how you do it, right? Amazing. The
Should
other,
be a t-shirt. I need it as a
I
t-shirt,
think that needs to be a
right?
t-shirt. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But then the choice. I've been sitting with this idea of choice. When we give our children choice, and it's what you said about my children's success is not my own success. Meaning I'm not a successful parent when my children match my definition of success. But then there is something to be said, and there is something to consider when our children choose something for themselves that as they define success, and it is in opposition to what I define success, not even for them, but like for me right now. For instance, when you said, you know, for you, and I shared this too, I don't know if you saw me, I was over here shouting. I was in my shouting corner, okay? It's Sunday morning, shouting, right? For me, success is when my adult children can choose what they want to, who they want to be, what they want to do, what they want to have, and they can do it independently. And I understand that for children of varying different degrees of whatever their capabilities are, right? If you have a neurodivergent child or a disabled child, then independence looks different. I get that. I'm looking at the six that I have. And we talked about this yesterday, there are some that independence needs a little bit of coaching. There's some that independence needs a little bit, okay, whoa, wait, come back a second, let me. But it's that goal of being happy and doing what you want to do and doing it independently of me, because I have goals for myself that I want to do, right? That now
Yeah.
that we have entered into this stage of parenthood, I still have three that are, you know, still not quite technically legally adult. That fourth one can he could be pushed up there, but the younger two for sure. So it's having that conversation with my adult children to say, you have every right. And I had this conversation with my 18-year-old about managing his health. When you talked about health, he and I had this conversation just the other day. I said, all right, buddy, look, I'm going to insert mom one more time by manhandling you to go to the doctor. But after this, after you and I both hear what the doctor has to say, it's all yours. However you want to manage that. And you got every right to do what you want to do. And I got every right not to want to see it. It's your life. And I get to live mine. And when your children are small, when they're 2 and 3 or 9 or 10, at that time, I couldn't even fathom saying something like that to my 18
Right.
and 22, right? And so to all of the parents who are listening, understand that this parenting journey is a journey. Where you start is not how you're going to be when you end, because your babies, who they are, they're going to be different people by the time they're adults. And so it's the agility of it all. So I was over here, girl, I needed a church fan, child. I was over here. I'm a black girl from Philly, grew up in a Baptist church. I need to meet a church fan with Martin Luther King on one side and the praying hands and the funeral home on the other. That's how we do.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So thank you, Stacey. I got a lot out of that. What I'm going to do, and this is my charge to everyone, consider what you heard today and how are you going to apply it. So a couple things I'm going to do in my family. I love when you said the happy test. We're going to do some happy testing around here. Yeah, we're going to do that. And I'm going to ask my children, what does success mean to them at their different stages? My kids are 23, almost 22, 18, 16, oh Lord, 14 and 11.
Too many kids.
Not enough coffee. Okay, not enough.
That's right.
So, so I'm going to ask them, I'm going to take that from your talk today, and I'm going to ask them, what does it mean? And I'm going to write down for me what success means for me, and we're going to have a conversation about that. And I want to ask them, what if their choice of success does not match, or if it's different than my definition of success? And we're going to have a conversation about that.
Good. Yeah, that's probably the best outcome, is to have that conversation for sure.
So the floor is open. The floor is open. I know some people are putting some things in the chat. So just so you know the time frame, the next talk is due to start at 1:30. And so if you are a speaker here for the next talk, I ask that you hop over to your room 5 minutes before. Okay, and then we'll put a little something in the chat to remind people. So folks can stay here. Stacey, you're welcome to stay here in your room as long as you like and field questions. I will stop recording at around 1:15 so that I can get ready for the other room. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So ask away. What did y'all get out of this? What's defining success? What you say?
Does anybody have a question or something you want me to clarify? Because I am happy to. Yeah, Jasmine.
Yeah. So I loved so much of what you shared, and I'm feeling super inspired. I have I think kind of an interesting. I have interesting children, I'm sure we all do. And I have one kiddo who just, like, the weight of a goal feels too much. And then I was even thinking of the happy test, which, like, and I'll let you know that yesterday I asked a question in the groups, like, so what are the benchmarks then, right? Like, if we're not using our society's educational benchmarks. So when you started talking to me, I was like, this is exactly what I need. This is my list of notes. It's like full. I wrote down so many things. But then as we were moving through it, even the happy test, what happens really quickly in my house with at least one of my kiddos is it feels like judgment, and there's like such a quick shutdown, right? So, like, if I set a goal and I didn't hit my goal, then it very quickly moves from, it's like we can't get into that. It's hard. I shouldn't say we can't. It's hard to get into that conversation of, like, what would we do differently? I
use the phrase, was today a good day?
Yeah.
So that takes the pressure off of it, right? Mm-hmm. So was today a good day? And then I want to know why. What made today a good day? So a lot of this has not anything to do with in weighty conversation. It's just listening. So I'm listening and watching very carefully about how they manage their day, because I've watched them all day long. And so were they troubled by anything? Were they pretty free? Did they balk at any particular activity we were doing? Did they dig in their heels at all? So I'll give you an example. I had a 5-year-old he's neurodiverse. So he's definitely ADHD, and he has performance anxiety. He's 14, almost 15 now. And we went on a trip to the Gulf Islands on the west coast of Canada. And I planned a sea kayaking trip. So it was just a day trip, and we were going to go circle an island and get off and go kind of have a barbecue. And he knew it. He knew what was coming. And he got to the pier and he went, nope. Oh, hell no, I'm not getting in that boat, right? And it costs a lot of money. And if he doesn't go, it means one of the adults can't go. But because of the size of my other children, he has to go because I have to be in a boat with someone else. And then the oldest one could be in a boat by himself. So he didn't have a choice that day. He got stuffed in the front of a kayak and he crossed his arms and would not touch the paddle. It poured buckets. He refused to put a rain jacket on. He just sat there with this like miserable look on his face for like the entire experience. We ended up running into some sea otters that ended up playing in front of us in front of the ocean, and he pretended like he was not watching it. And so he attaches a lot of emotional experience or emotional energy into the experience we have. And he also goal sets and then self-deprecates in the failure of the goal setting later. And I asked him at the end of the day, it's like, what was today like for you? Like, how was your day? How was your day today? And he was able to unpack in that moment that sometimes I'm going to have to do something I don't realize I will enjoy later. The only time he paddles when we said we were going to go home and that kid picked up that paddle and rocked it. My husband didn't even actually have to paddle the kayak again, but he was like, he was done and he wanted to go, but he still thought it was a positive experience. So I think that when you have children that tend to put a lot of self-emotion and energy into accomplishing something, there's some sort of external measure that's creeping into their life somehow. I don't know if it's maybe they're watching it on YouTube or they're comparing themselves to their siblings, is start putting energy into the idea of what happy means, not goal setting or success. What does happy mean for you? When you feel really happy, where are you in that moment? And then you're able to apply that backwards to that question at the end of the day, I think. And then he or she will be able to start doing that, to start saying, oh, I see that I accomplished those goals and those made me happy. And it was the accomplishment of the goal that made me happy, but that might take time. It just might take time to unpack that. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Tony Robbins actually uses this technique where he asks the audience, and this is more about that making it an ownership to a goal, a personal level of a goal. And he said, now, once you set that goal, I just want you to imagine the worst possible outcome if you didn't actually reach that goal. If you did nothing to reach that goal, that's the question. It's not that you didn't reach it, but what would be the worst possible outcome if you did nothing to work towards that goal? Because that's the ownership piece that attaches to it. And it reminds me that your question about your child reminds me of that, is to say when they own the goal and they are not expecting the cookie at the end for doing it, when the goal is owned by them, you'll find that the judgment they won't feel judged because they judge themselves. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I don't want to take, if anybody else wants to speak, but I have a follow-up for that, which is, can you talk a little bit about like the culture or how you sort of, in a very goal-oriented culture, how do you talk about getting rid of a goal when you realize it's no longer serving you?
The
Maybe
quitting,
that's where.
yeah, the quitting thing. So that is very personal. Just like somebody was commenting on, be careful with like weight loss, and that's triggering for people. There's the triggers for everything. So that actually is, I mean, it's, although I'm not super keen on the word trigger, but that sets off personal memories, because it was what I was accused of constantly as a child, because I was a dabbler. Like I went into everything and then I'd decide that really wasn't my jam, and then I would drop it. So that was the judgment conversation in my household, is that, do you ever finish anything? And you're a quitter and you don't see anything through to the end. And a lot of my goals as a young adult tend to be centered around almost proving that I could finish something. So I think that you do definitely need to let kids quit, right? That they can try and they can fail, and that even quitting after you fail is not a sign that you can't persevere. So we try things constantly, right? We're always doing that. But if you're not trying, you won't fail. So the failure in the quitting is a sign that you try. And that's the language that we put that in. The one who isn't quitting anything and isn't failing anything is not doing anything. So, and that's hard when it's like, well, I would like to do, I would like to do equestrian show jumping, and you buy yourself a $20,000 horse, and then you've got like $1,500 a month, and seriously, the amount of coin I've dropped on some, I don't want to do that anymore. And I could just feel my eye twitching as the brain synapses start to unhinge in my head as I'm like, okay, like you try to be really gracious about it. It's all right. So I learned over time to go, can we try it? Can we find like a trial class, or can we do a try it kind of thing? Like the horse one's a perfect example. The youngest one was positive that he wanted to do horses. And this comes with a lot of weight in our house because our eldest is very allergic to horses. So there was this hazmat chemical wash down at the back trunk every time they went near the horses, because I couldn't bring that stuff into the house. Like, it was a logistical nightmare to do this, but I'm trying to facilitate it. And we get it all kind of set up, and he was good as long as the horse was over there. But that horse came into his personal space and he had an absolute meltdown. He didn't realize horses were that big, first of all, I guess. And then the horse kind of pushed him over, and that was it. I mean, like I walked away from a good chunk of coin for that. And so then I learned to say, well, you're going to go pet a horse at the fence first. And then we're going to, yeah. So I will build up to it now, but the quitting has to always be okay. And that you have to put some energy around the idea of, and some language around the idea that quitting does not mean you're a failure. It means it's an attempt that just didn't sit with you. And now let's find something different. Often it ends up pivoting, right? So they'll try something specifically and then it pivots into something else they didn't realize was something that they liked. It was kind of sort of this peripheral thing that they're doing. And you don't discover those things unless you're trying multiple things. I've always got parents that ask me about the cost. I coach a lot of homeschool parents to say, well, she decided she would like to go to college and take mycology. I'm like, mushrooms. Well, that's awesome. So, and then abandoned it completely, like just didn't even show up. But what they didn't realize was that same daughter who was literally sitting in the parking lot and not even going, was actually doing research on her own and realized she didn't actually have to go to the community college to do mycology. And she started a YouTube channel and actually has her own foraging business now. So she just, it kind of went in a different direction, but they probably, whatever it was, like $5,000 they spent on a year of college. And then she just, like most people realize when they go to college, they're going, wow, this is trash. Why am I taking all these extra classes? It seems like a waste of my time. So I think that's probably just the realization, but there's this anxiety around the idea that you need to finish what you start. I'm not a fan of that, but that still is a personal philosophy in your homeschool, is that, it doesn't matter, soldier, you take what you want, but you eat what you take. If you got that kind of household, then go nuts. If that's your deal, and then that's fine. But as long as those expectations are clear, I don't want you to start something unless you're going to see it through to the end. So let's find a way for you to try it. And if that's a rule in a permutation, I don't believe that we need to stuff every homeschool, every family into the same box to say, this is the way it worked for me, so it needs to work for you. I think you just got to read the room and just figure out, especially that judgment thing. That's a lot of energy that your child has, that has something about where their self-esteem is being impacted. And I think I would be very cautious of that. Find ways for them to have that, because self-confidence is, I know I can do it, but self-esteem is, I believe I have value. And those are two very fundamentally different mindsets, and they should be married together.
Could I pop in and ask a question that was in the chat, which is also something I meant to ask you as well, Stacey? You mentioned earlier about your strewing buckets. Cody asked, first of all, I love that. That's brilliant. Wish I had thought about that years ago when my kids were younger. That would have saved me some time. But Cody asked the question, how did you know to do these things? From the happy task to the strewing buckets, how did you know that they would even work?
I didn't know that they worked, because I'm the quitter, right? I try so many things. Oh my God. And there's some epic failures. I'll come to you in a second, Karen. What was one of the epic failures that I did? Like, I set up this entire room with all of the Lego. I bought a butt ton of Lego, and my kids hate Lego. There's a perfect example. I would steer it. I really wanted them all to be engineers. I think this is where that success conversation comes in. It's like I had this in my brain, and they're very gregarious and social and creative people. I don't know if you ever met an engineer. They're not. So it was like I didn't birth the right kids to, breed engineers. And so that was probably one of the first moments where I realized that I was creating things and not it's and the irony of that is I'm a usability expert. So I applied that methodology. So I would lay things in front of them and test. It was just a constant testing. I would say, would this work? The strewing buckets were based upon things they said they were interested in order to drive independence. So that's the reason why I did that. They had these sort of buckets. They would wake up in the morning and have all the resources they need because they wanted to color something, or they wanted to study bugs, or they wanted to, sometimes that had to be facilitated. So it was only the contents, and they knew that that was something that would allow them to ask me. It was a trigger for them to say, oh, right, I wanted to do this. Can you help me? Here's all the equipment. So one of them is they wanted to mount bugs. They were studying bugs for some reason, and they had, you catch bugs and then you put them in the freezer, and then you spread your wings out and stick them on a pin, and you put them on a piece of starboard, and it's like a whole thing. I know. It was the thing. We saw like a talk, and they obsessed over this guy who was this entomologist that did this. And so I had to do some research. I know. And I had to do this bucket thing in the backyard where you take 2 coffee cans and you bury them at ground level. Like you dig a hole, and then you put poop in one and meat in the other. Is a poop bucket and the meat bucket, and different kinds of bugs are attracted to that. So I put all the stuff to be able to do the meat and the poop bucket. I gagged for days over that experiment. Right. So yeah, okay, so this is the yeah, that's how I'm a historian. So that's what I did in university, and I'm a research maven. So that's how I came up with this stuff, is that that's why the Alice newsletter, it's like, I know that Mary Ellen had commented on that. It's just, I have a rabbit hole that is an abyss that you just dip your toes over the edge. And of course, because I'm so organized, I've kept all of my strewing things in a spreadsheet. So over 13 years of homeschool discovery and content, and I have it all in a spreadsheet that I've kept over time. I know, I'm a homeschool facilitator's dream. She just loves me. Yes. So super, super organized. Even the fact that I'm like power to the people, stick it to the man. And sometimes I rage against the machine. And my homeschool report at the beginning of the year, the learning plan, I did it in a mind map once. It's almost like flipping the bird to the organization that is our government homeschooling. I'm not giving you anything. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. So that's the stream buckets. That's how I came up with it, because I wanted them to be independent. If I put all the crap that they needed in a bucket, then they can, were they more independent? No. Made me feel better, and they loved playing with it. And it was sort of a source of discovery, and sometimes they did. They knew that they could, because I have 3 kids and they all interacted with those buckets differently, or they would steal the other guy's bucket, and then I'd have to buy 6 of everything just to make sure I had doubles. And yeah, it's like that.
So listen, Stacey, y'all keep going. I'm going to stop recording. So give me a cute little wave face right there. There we go.
Bye.